Deepshika always, having known her for so many years, gives the most impossible task to me often, which is, I think, Nikunj, let me add to that. I have a lot more experience out there. So this is what I call as the graveyard session. And by the way, just to clear the picture out here, these 4 people are the only people who stand between you and going home. So, but the problem is that the people that you see out here are extremely determined. And before I introduce them, I think I should also briefly introduce the topic that we are today going to, have an exchange between what the dais is saying out here and the people out, the audience are trying to put together and their views. So if you look at, the way Major General Bakshi talked about it, I feel we are somewhere in that prep zone of 8 months, except that this could be slightly longer for some of the things that we'll be talking about today. But in terms of the way they prepared, the way they put things together, and I think if you look at it, it is very exciting to be at that cusp of a change, an industry that has been fairly, not that dramatic a change, especially when you look at products. When I speak to a lot of OEMs, I speak to a lot of dealerships across Asia Pacific, and when you look at it, most of them say it's the product that drives this industry. The product is the key part of this industry. But frankly speaking, if you look at the way this, the product, the car, or the two-wheeler for that matter, has been for the past so many decades, I think today what we are looking at is a very exciting change, and it's great to be a part of it in terms of the way the whole category is going to evolve as we go forward. Of course, whenever there is change, it brings in a lot of anxiety, it brings in a lot of angst. And I think it's fair for, Dr. Lamba talked about it, you are putting your own money into it, so I think from that perspective, you need to understand whether the business case still exists for you to be in business going forward. So to talk about some of these things and to look at what this could mean in terms of the future of mobility, I have with me a very august gathering of experts. Let me start by introducing this gentleman on my right, Mr. Venkesh Gulati. I think he needs no introduction, but I went through his resume and I actually had to write down all the 3 resumes out here because it was impossible for me to remember all the things that these 3 gentlemen have done. But just to impress you one more time, he is a member of the FADA Governing Council. He's a law graduate and has done Masters in Commerce and Masters in Business Management. He runs a 2-wheeler dealership. He runs a 4-wheeler dealership. He also runs a United Group of Institutions, which is basically providing education in Allahabad and Greater Noida areas. He also has a newspaper, which is basically a Hindi daily newspaper that he is actively involved with, and of course has been with FADA, with FADA for the last 8 years. On my far left is basically a gentleman. I was telling him that, I'm going to introduce you as the money man. He is the man who has a company by the name of the Rainmaker Group. The name says it all. So essentially, if you look at him, he has been advising digital and technology companies on their M&A efforts, fundraising efforts. Companies like cardekho.com, Gaadi.com, he has been instrumental in investing about $100 million in cardekho.com and other companies that he talked about, Via.com, Porter.com. He is an engineer from NSIT Delhi and an MBA from IIM Kozhikode and EBS Germany. So he is the money man. And what I have on my right is the industry guru. And let me introduce this gentleman who is sitting immediately on my left. Mr. Jagan Padmanabhan. He is the director and practice leader with transport and logistics for CRISIL Infrastructure Advisory. Jagan's career has been extremely illustrious. He has worked for about 17 years in the consulting industry, looked at strategy, corporate and competitive strategy, commercial due diligence, project feasibility, new entry, and process operations and improvement. The list goes on and on. He's advising companies. He's worked on 300 consulting engagements. He has been a part of Deloitte in the past and right now works for CRISIL. He's an MBA and an engineer by profession. So he's our thought leader. So we have the money man, we have the thought leader, and we have the industry guru. So basically, looking at, and I'm the sutradhar. So basically, I'm the person who would try and string this together as we go along to what we see as a possible future for the industry going forward. So can I have the presentation, please? I just want to introduce a couple of things and set the tone before we start to delve deeper into two concepts. And again, I think it was Deepshika who kept telling me that earlier we had an hour. She cut it down to 45 minutes, and now I believe we have 30 minutes, gentlemen. So essentially, we need to portray the picture and paint the future for the audience out here. Of course, I would add to one more thing. I think some of you may have been in some of the sessions, my sessions in the past, and you know that I talk a lot to the audience. So I will come back to you at specific points of time as we go along. But before I start, it feels a little bit like Alice in Wonderland. If you really look at it, the kind of options that are facing the auto industry today, in terms of you look at connected cars, you look at shared mobility, you look at electric vehicles, you look at ride-sharing options, shared mobility, car-sharing options, and of course, it is not to lessen the fact that there is the whole aspect of public transportation, okay? And I think we have Jagan out here who has done a lot of work on public transportation, and probably he would speak to you about it as we go along. But in terms of looking at the first aspect that I would probably talk to you is in terms of the concept of connected car. And that is where, if you look at the whole concept of connected car, at this point of time, this is something which is really upon us. What you see here on the bottom side, on the bottom left-hand side, is the penetration of cars which were shipped with a connected car option, which is in terms of a hardware or a software, like a Wi-Fi, Bluetooth enabled, whatever it was, from the factory in 2015, globally. Look at the number on the right. Our estimates are that in the next 5 years, nearly 40% of these cars will be shipped from the factories around the world across OEMs, which will be completely connected to the world all the time, every place. Already in markets like the US, and you look at some of the other markets in North America, these cars are continuously talking and communicating the location of the vehicle, the position where you are. I mean, it also gives you a lot of information about the driver himself. And that brings in a lot of questions which kind of come onto the aspect of ethical questions sometimes. Questions where we don't really have answers at this point of time. Let me ask the audience out here, how many of you are comfortable with the concept of a car which is continuously relaying what you did, where did you go yesterday, at what speed did you drive, which all parts of the city did you visit, whom all did you visit, when did you change a lane without giving a turn signal? How many of you, can I see by show of hands, how many of you are comfortable in sharing the intimate details of what happened to you, how you used this car with an unknown third party? Can I see a show of hands, please? So is that number 0? My God, we killed the concept. Well,
So, but Mohit,
yeah.
if you check on Google Maps,
Right.
so it's already happening.
Exactly.
So the car is not equipped, but once you are using Google Map to find a place to go,
Right.
so you are actually doing the same thing.
Absolutely. So I think, as Venkesh rightly said, and I think with that, I would open this question now to the panel here. And let me start with Kashyap on my far left. If you really look at the disruptions that you see right now, Kashyap, these are not the disruptions. I think Venkesh clearly said Google Maps. These are not the disruptions that the auto industry chose to make. These are disruptions that were thrust upon the auto industry by the technology world, by the telecom world. So looking at the whole industry, where do you think? At this point of time, are the technology companies disruptive or collaborative to the current business model?
That's a very interesting question, and given that you've already qualified me as a money man and him as a thought leader, I will push the thought leadership question on him. What perspective I can give you on is
Where is the
that
money going?
is where the money going, and has the money followed disruption, right? And let me give you some empirical evidence because I mean the world that we operate in, people tend to believe that it's like the Truman Show, it's a different world where unreal things keep happening because we keep reading about some of these startups or digital media companies and news around the tens or hundreds of millions of dollars that they've raised or a few $1 billion that they've raised, and there are question marks around whether they are real businesses.
Right.
And empirical evidence really suggests, I'll give you a few examples, that traditional businesses have really, in India, grasped the value, in these disruptive technologies that are coming up. So, I had the good fortune of working with, two founders, one by the name of Amit Jain, who runs a company called cardekho.com, which incidentally is among India's top 10 digital companies now. Two of the investors that we have in the company are as conservative as it gets. One is the name that you see here, HDFC Bank, which is perhaps, definitely the most valued private sector bank in India, and also just about the most conservative. They made an investment, into a loss-making digital company. And it was for the first time in years, that they made that investment from the balance sheet, which means that, conservative lenders also understand, the kind of impact, that it can have on their business. For them, it was an opportunity of collaborating with a digital startup that could open a blue ocean for them when it comes to, used car financing.
Right.
And despite their size, despite the supposed bureaucracy of large companies, they had the, entrepreneurial foresight, to invest in such a company. Again, a gentleman by the name of Mr. Ratan Tata, who's
We know
very,
him.
very conservative,
We definitely know him.
right? Very, very careful about, the kind of companies that he puts his name against. He took such a call.
Right.
Another company that we had a good fortune of working against, run by a 27-year-old founder, okay, called Pranav Goyal. The company is called Porter, okay. They are the Uber for intra-city trucking. The mini trucks that you see all around the city. Typically, small businesses, tend to go to the nakas and, call a guy, who will deliver, goods from them from one part of the city to the other.
Right.
Right? What this company did was, it brought, this particular transaction on the mobile app.